Welcome to our deep dive into Tolstoy's War and Peace. We've got some fascinating excerpts, and this book is massive, so we're going to focus on how societal pressures and relationships shape the characters' lives.
Okay.
Like we're peeking into 19th century Russia, think balls, gossip, matchmaking,
Right.
all while Napoleon's kind of looming in the background.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about these excerpts is how they show these timeless human experiences, ambition, love, duty, even the search for meaning. These are all things we still deal with today.
Definitely.
It's as relevant now as it was back then.
Let's just jump right in that scene at Anna Pavlovna's soiree.
Oh, yeah.
Can you set the scene for us? What's going on?
Okay, so picture a high society gathering, but it's not just a party, right? It's a stage where everyone's performing.
Oh, interesting.
They're all competing for social advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And Tolstoy, he's a master at showing those subtle power plays, like all those anxieties simmering beneath the surface.
Yeah, Princess Drubetskaya's desperation to get her son, Boris, a military post that really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering, do her anxieties also reflect the limited options for women back then?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she has to rely on a man to advance her son's career.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Princess Drubetskaya, she shows how women, even though they were excluded from power,
Right.
they had to rely on social influence and even manipulation to get what they wanted. Tolstoy's really clever about showing these constraints on women in 19th century Russia, all through her actions.
Yeah, and the imagery he uses is so vivid. I love how Anna Pavlovna compares the Vicomte to, like, a well-garnished joint of roast beef.
Right.
It's like she's presenting him to her guests for their amusement.
Yeah, that's classic Tolstoy. He uses these little details, things you might not even notice at first,
Oh, I see.
to show just how shallow and transactional all these interactions really are.
Right.
It's not about connecting with people. It's about using people to climb that social ladder.
That makes sense. And speaking of climbing, Prince Vasily trying to marry off his children, that's a perfect example of how status drove courtship. But how common were arranged marriages back then? Was love even a factor?
Well, even though romantic love was this ideal thing in art and literature, marriage, especially among the aristocracy, it was often seen as strategic.
I see.
Prince Vasily, he's relentless about finding those good matches for his kids, even overlooking their flaws. It really shows that whole mentality.
It makes you wonder if any of those couples were actually happy or if it was all just for show.
It's a great question. And Tolstoy, he explores it throughout the novel.
Oh, interesting.
That tension between what society expects and what people actually want. It plays out in so many different ways. And it leads to, well, both happy endings and some real tragedies.
Wow. So let's move on to the Bolkonskis. They seem so different from, like, the Kuragins.
Oh, yeah, they're a world apart.
Yeah.
The Bolkonskis, with all their emphasis on duty and tradition, intellect, it's a fascinating contrast. The old prince, with his routines and that sternness, he's like a relic of a bygone era.
Right.
Where honor and lineage were everything.
Yeah. But even in that strict environment, there's all this tension.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, Princess Mary, she's so devoted to her father and her faith.
Mm-hmm.
But she mentions feeling ugly.
Right.
She worries about never getting married. It's kind of heartbreaking.
It is. But it's important to remember that Princess Mary's anxieties, those reflect the few options women had back then.
Okay.
Beauty, marriage, these were everything for a woman's social standing.
Right.
And Mary, she's so aware of her flaws, so she just internalizes all that societal pressure. That decision to leave her hair unstyled when she's waiting for a suitor.
Yeah.
It says so much about how she feels, torn between what she wants and what she thinks God wants for her.
Yeah. It's like her faith gives her comfort, but it also makes her feel inadequate in a way.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And speaking of inadequate, what about Anatole Kuragin? He's clearly not a good match for her.
No, not at all. Anatole, with all that charm, but so superficial, he represents everything the Bolkonskis hate.
Oh, I see.
Him going after Mary, that's all his father. Wanting that money and status, that connection. Tolstoy uses Anatole to show how people manipulate others for their own gain.
So we've got these social climbers, scheming parents, and everyone's anxious about what society expects of them. Let's switch gears a bit. What about the Rostovs? They seem much warmer, more lively than the Bolkonskis.
Oh, yeah. The Rostovs, they're impulsive, warm. They just love life. It's such a refreshing change from those more reserved, intellectual Bolkonskis.
Right.
They show a different side of Russian society.
Right.
One where emotions and spontaneity are celebrated.
I was so drawn to Natasha. She's just a force of nature. That scene at the ball where she meets Prince Andrei.
Oh, yeah.
It's magical. You can almost feel the unspoken connection between them. It gives me chills just thinking about it.
It's that intoxicating power of first love.
Yeah.
Natasha, with all her youthful energy, her spirit, she awakens something in Prince Andrei, something he thought he'd lost after all those years at war. Tolstoy is amazing at portraying these subtle details in their connection.
Right.
He's hinting at a future full of both passion and, well, probably some turmoil.
Knowing Tolstoy, I bet their love story won't be easy.
You're probably right. Tolstoy, he's a master at these complex narratives, and he's not afraid to show the darker side of human nature.
Yeah.
Love, in his world, it's not a fairy tale.
Right.
It's a force that can both build you up and break you down.
Before we move on to Pierre, I'm curious about something.
Yeah.
Tolstoy seems to contrast the Kuragins, who are so calculated, almost cold, with the genuine warmth of the Rostovs. Is he saying something about different values in Russian society?
That's interesting. Tolstoy doesn't, come right out and say one family's better,
Right.
but he definitely shows the consequences of their choices.
Oh, I see.
The Kuragins, focused on status and possessions,
Yeah.
they often end up unhappy, caught in all this deceit. The Rostovs, they find joy in the simple things: family, love, connection.
It really makes you think about what matters most in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tolstoy makes us question our own priorities, how our choices affect us and everyone around us.
Okay, so now, Pierre. He's a fascinating character. Awkward, inherits a fortune, and suddenly he's in a world he doesn't quite get.
Right.
What did you find most striking about him?
Pierre's on this journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
It's one of the most captivating parts of War and Peace. He's constantly searching for meaning,
Right.
wrestling with those moral dilemmas, trying to figure out where he fits in. From that marriage to Helene Kuragina,
Right.
to that duel with Dolokhov, we see him making mistakes, getting his heart broken, and finally trying to understand himself and the world around him.
His involvement in Freemasonry really stood out to me. Can you explain what Freemasonry is and why he was drawn to it?
Well, simply put, Freemasonry is this fraternal organization.
Okay.
It stresses moral uprightness, brotherly love, self-improvement. It's a secret society with rituals and symbols,
Right.
which would have been really appealing in a society obsessed with tradition and hierarchy. Now, Pierre, he's struggling to find his place. He inherits this fortune
Right. Right.
and feels like an outsider. So Freemasonry, it gives him a sense of belonging, purpose, and like a guide for how to live a moral life.
So it's not just about secret handshakes and all that.
No, not at all. Tolstoy uses Pierre's involvement to explore his search for a moral and spiritual compass.
Interesting.
He's drawn to these ideals of brotherhood, charity, and self-improvement.
Right.
He wants his life to mean something more.
It's fascinating that he finds comfort in a group focused on reason and virtue, especially with this chaotic war going on.
That's a great observation. Pierre's exploration of Freemasonry shows that human need for meaning and connection,
Yeah.
especially during those times of upheaval and uncertainty.
That makes sense. What about that scene with the travel on the ferry, where he learns about serving others?
Oh, yeah.
That feels like a turning point for him.
Absolutely. What that traveler says about simplicity, virtue, finding joy in helping others, it resonates deeply with Pierre.
Right.
He's been dealing with the burdens of wealth and those societal pressures.
Yeah.
It's a moment of clarity for him, a different path, one focused on inner peace and real connection instead of material things and status.
It's like Tolstoy is saying true happiness comes from connecting with something bigger than yourself, whether it's faith, community, or helping others. It's a pretty powerful message.
It is. Tolstoy's insights into what it means to be human, those moments of searching and spiritual awakening, they still resonate with us today.
We've covered a lot, from the Kuragins' scheming to the Rostovs' warmth,
Yeah.
and now Pierre's quest for meaning.
Right.
It's amazing how Tolstoy weaves these individual journeys together with history.
And that's just the beginning. In the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we'll see how these characters handle love, loss, and their search for meaning, all while the Napoleonic Wars rage on. It's going to be quite a ride.
I can't wait. We left off with Pierre kind of finding some solace in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
But before we go back to him, I want to revisit the Bolkonskis.
Okay.
You mentioned that their family's all about duty and tradition,
Right.
which could create a pretty stifling environment.
Oh, definitely. Especially for Princess Mary. Imagine living under the old prince with his strict routines and constant critiques.
Right.
He's from a different time, a man who values reason and order above all else.
Yeah.
He loves his daughter, but he doesn't really get her emotional depth or her spiritual side.
And she's so devoted to him, even though he's so harsh. You can feel her wanting his approval,
Right.
even as she's trying to figure out her own desires and deal with those societal pressures.
Yeah.
How does Tolstoy use her story to comment on, like, what was expected of women back then in Russia?
He subtly shows how few options women like Mary really had.
Okay.
She's intelligent, compassionate, deeply spiritual,
Mm.
but society only cared about her getting married. Her worrying about her looks, thinking she'll be a spinster.
Yeah. Those are reflections of the constraints she faced. She's supposed to be a good daughter, pious, and eventually a wife and mother. Her own dreams come second. It's like her faith, which gives her strength, also makes her feel inadequate.
That's a good point. Mary's faith is both empowering and controlling.
How so?
It teaches her to be humble, accept God's will, which can be seen as self-denial.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
She's always looking for guidance from God,
Right.
but she interprets it through the lens of what society tells her.
And then there's Anatole.
Ugh, Anatole.
Knowing he just wants her family's money and status,
Yeah,
it makes her vulnerability even more heartbreaking.
exactly. Mary, even though she's smart and devout, she's still drawn to flattery and attention. Anatole, with that shallow charm and empty promises,
Right.
he takes advantage of her insecurities, her longing for love.
It shows that even the most religious people can be tempted.
Yeah, especially when they're lonely and feeling undervalued.
It makes you think Tolstoy's reminding us that we're all human, prone to weakness and manipulation.
Totally. It doesn't matter what your social standing is or how strong your morals are.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about love.
Okay.
These excerpts have some pretty intense romances.
They do.
Natasha and Prince Andrei, for example, their connection is electric.
Yeah.
But knowing Tolstoy, I'm kind of nervous about how their story goes.
Right. Tolstoy doesn't write those simple fairy tale romances.
Right.
He shows love as this complex, powerful force that can both lift you up and destroy you.
Wow.
Natasha and Andrei, their connection is strong at first.
Yeah.
She brings back his passion for life, gives him some joy after the war, but they're so different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And their relationship faces a lot of challenges.
Their differences are pretty stark.
Yeah.
He's so introspective, reserved, carrying the weight of his family legacy. She's impulsive, vibrant, lives in the moment. Is Tolstoy setting them up for a tragic ending?
Well, I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, fair enough.
But Tolstoy definitely shows the difficulties of love. War and society play a part,
Yeah,
but their own struggles, their flaws and insecurities,
right.
those also contribute to the ups and downs of their relationship.
That scene where Natasha's tempted by Anatole while Andrei's away, that's so sad.
Ugh, I know.
She falls for his charms.
Yeah,
Even though we've seen her genuine love for Andrei.
it's heartbreaking.
It is.
But that scene is so important for Natasha's character.
Really.
It shows her vulnerability, how loneliness and manipulation can affect her,
Right.
and ultimately how she's capable of both great love and big mistakes.
Wow.
It reminds us that even the strongest love isn't immune to pressures and doubts.
Right, right.
It makes you think about the choices we make when we're vulnerable
Yeah.
and how those choices impact everyone around us.
Go back to Pierre. We left him finding comfort in Freemasonry.
Right?
But it seems like that's not the end of his search for meaning.
Pierre's always evolving, always searching and questioning. He wants something more. Right. Freemasonry gives him some structure and belonging,
Yeah.
but he's still looking for his true purpose.
What about his marriage to Helene? That doesn't go so well, right?
It doesn't. That marriage, it's driven by a few things: infatuation, societal pressure, maybe even a desire to rebel against being an outsider.
Oh, interesting.
But it's clear they're just not compatible. Helene's superficial, manipulative.
Right.
She cares more about status than real connection.
It seems like Pierre learns a lot from that, even if it's painful.
Definitely. Being disillusioned by Helene makes him face his naivete. He has to reconsider what's important. It pushes him further on this path of self-discovery.
Yeah.
He starts looking for meaning beyond money and status.
And then there's that encounter with the traveler.
Oh, yeah, on the ferry.
That seems like a turning point.
It's crucial for Pierre's spiritual growth.
How so?
What that traveler says about finding happiness by helping others, it really hits home for Pierre.
Yeah.
He realizes that true fulfillment isn't about material things or recognition.
It's about contributing to something bigger than himself.
That message seems especially relevant today, with everyone so focused on individual success and wealth.
Tolstoy was onto something.
Yeah.
His insights go beyond time and place.
Right.
He reminds us that true happiness is often found in simple acts of kindness, connecting with others, finding meaning outside of ourselves.
What about Nicholas Rostov and Sonia?
Oh, yeah.
Their relationship seems quieter, less dramatic than Natasha and Andrei's.
It is.
But still, it's pretty profound.
Nicholas and Sonia's love story is about loyalty, sacrifice, and lasting affection.
Oh?
Sonia's devotion to Nicholas, even when he's not so sure.
Right.
It's both amazing and kind of sad. She's
Yeah.
so strong, so selfless.
Right.
Her kind of love often goes unnoticed
Yeah, I see what you mean.
in a world obsessed with grand gestures and declarations.
Yeah, and Nicholas, even though he has those youthful flings,
Yeah.
he comes to appreciate Sonia's love,
Mm.
realizes how important she is. It shows the power of shared history, mutual respect, really understanding each other. It's a love built on friendship and values,
Right.
the kind of love that can survive anything.
It's a nice change of pace from those more tumultuous romances.
Totally.
It shows that love can be different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the quiet connections are the strongest.
Exactly.
Tolstoy shows all sorts of relationships, how love can be different, the challenges it faces.
So we've got these love stories happening while the Napoleonic Wars are raging.
Right.
How does Tolstoy connect those historical events with the characters' personal journeys?
He does it so well.
Yeah.
He weaves the intimate and the epic together,
Oh, interesting.
showing how these wars affect not just the battles, but the daily lives of everyday Russians.
Right.
Families are torn apart, estates are disrupted, and society is tested under the weight of war.
These excerpts give us some intense glimpses into what war was really like.
Yeah, they do.
The Battle of Austerlitz, especially.
It's chaotic and terrifying.
It is.
Tolstoy definitely wants to shatter any romantic illusions about war.
Absolutely. He shows war's brutality, how different it is from the heroic ideals.
Right.
Prince Andrei's disillusionment, lying there wounded, staring at the sky.
Yeah.
It's a powerful image of lost illusions and despair.
And Nicholas, so excited to go to war at first, he quickly learns some hard truths about the cost of conflict.
Yeah.
It's like Tolstoy saying that war makes you confront your own mortality, makes you rethink your priorities.
That's a key theme in the novel.
Okay.
War changes people.
Yeah.
Forces them to face death, question their beliefs,
Right.
and ultimately decide what truly matters.
It's fascinating how Tolstoy captures both the big picture of history and the small details of human experience.
Yeah, he's good at that.
It makes you realize that even huge events are shaped by individual choices.
And in the last part of our deep dive, we'll see how those individual choices play out against the political landscape.
Oh, interesting.
We'll look at how Tolstoy portrays the Napoleonic Wars
Right.
and their impact on Russian society.
Okay. So we've talked about these characters' lives, their love, loss, searching for meaning.
Right.
Now, let's step back, look at the bigger picture, the Napoleonic Wars, and how they impacted Russian society.
Okay, yeah.
What did you see in these excerpts?
Tolstoy, he's so good at weaving together the personal and the political.
Yeah.
He shows how these huge historical events affect everyday people's lives. He doesn't shy away from how brutal war is, but he also shows the complexities of loyalty, patriotism, and how resilient people can be.
Right, right. One scene that really stuck with me, Rostov, seeing Napoleon and Alexander I meet at Tilsit.
Oh, yeah.
It's this moment of peace.
Right.
But Rostov's conflicted feelings hint that things aren't so simple. Can you talk about that a bit more?
So put yourself in Rostov's shoes. He's a young soldier, caught up in all that patriotic fervor.
Yeah.
He's seen the horrors of war firsthand.
Right.
The sacrifices his fellow soldiers have made. And then he sees these two powerful figures, Napoleon and Alexander, acting all friendly, like they formed this alliance. It's such a contrast.
Yeah, it is sick.
And Rostov's disillusionment, it shows how disconnected those big political gestures are from what the soldiers actually experience.
It's like the real cost of war gets lost in all those displays of power.
Exactly.
What about that scene where Napoleon gives Lazarev, a Russian soldier, the Legion of Honor? It felt almost strange, out of place.
That seems brilliant.
Yeah.
It shows how contradictory war is.
In what way?
You've got this supposed reconciliation, a French emperor honoring a Russian soldier.
Right.
But just moments ago, These men were trying to kill each other,
Wow. Yeah.
fighting for their countries.
Right.
It shows how arbitrary these alliances can be, how soldiers are just pawns in this bigger game.
It makes you think about the real reasons behind these political moves.
Definitely.
Speaking of reasons, the excerpts also get into loyalty and patriotism.
Yeah.
How does Tolstoy explore those themes through his characters?
He has a really nuanced view of patriotism.
Okay.
It's not just about blindly following your country.
Right.
He shows how people struggle with different loyalties to their family, friends, country, and even their own conscience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Rostov's internal struggle is a perfect example.
Exactly.
He starts out so patriotic, wanting to serve,
Mm-hmm.
but then he sees what war is really like
Right.
and how those in power manipulate things.
Uh-huh.
His faith in the system starts to crumble.
His journey shows how people become disillusioned when they see the difference between the ideal of war and the brutal reality.
And Prince Andrei, he thought military service would bring him glory.
Right.
But after Austerlitz, he starts questioning everything.
Yeah, Prince Andrei's disillusionment comes from realizing war isn't this grand adventure.
Right.
It's brutal and often meaningless.
It is.
Him lying wounded on the battlefield, looking up at the sky.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful image of that existential crisis that war can cause.
Yeah. It's like Tolstoy saying true heroism isn't about blindly obeying or chasing glory.
Yeah.
It's about seeing the humanity in your enemy, even in the middle of a conflict.
I think you're right. Tolstoy emphasizes compassion and understanding, even when things are tough.
Right.
He wants us to see past the political talk and recognize that we're all human.
And he doesn't hold back on showing how devastating war is, not just on the battlefield,
All right.
but back home, too.
He shows the ripple effects,
Yeah.
how war tears apart families, destroys communities, leaves these lasting scars.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Those scenes at Bald Hills, Prince Andrei's estate,
Oh, yeah.
they're so poignant.
They are. The old prince, even though he tries to stay strong,
Right.
is deeply affected by the war.
Mhm.
His obsession with defending his land, it shows how anxious he is about everything falling apart.
And Princess Mary, with her quiet strength and faith.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she really is.
She becomes a support for everyone, caring for the wounded, comforting those who are suffering.
Her compassion and resilience are incredible. It's like, even in the darkest times,
Yeah,
the human spirit can still find a way.
exactly. Tolstoy shows that even with all the destruction, there's still hope, kindness, people who step up and help each other.
So through these excerpts, we've gotten a deeper look at the Napoleonic Wars.
We have.
Not just as battles and politics,
Right.
but as this force that changes lives and reshapes Russia.
And what makes Tolstoy's work so powerful is how he connects those historical events
Yeah.
to those timeless human experiences, love, loss, resilience, searching for meaning.
Right.
He reminds us that history isn't just dates and names.
Right.
It's made up of countless people's lives and stories.
It's a powerful reminder that even in a chaotic world, our choices matter.
They do.
What we do, even if it seems small, shapes history.
He leaves us with this question. In the grand scheme of things, what choices will define your story?
That's a question we should all think about. This has been a fascinating deep dive into War and Peace.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.